The transport ship dropped out of hyperspace with a gentle hum. Through the small window, Gina could see the massive structure floating in the void. The Galactic Military Academy looked like a giant metal flower blooming in space. Its 12 arms stretched out from a central hub, each one as long as a city block. Lights dotted the surface like stars, and ships moved in and out of the docking bays like busy insects. Gina pressed her face against the cool glass. She had dreamed of this moment for 3 years. Ever since Earth joined the Galactic Federation, only the best human soldiers could apply to the Academy. Out of 10,000 applicants, only 50 humans were chosen. Out of those 50, only 3 made it through the first round of tests. She was one of them. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. Gina gathered her small bag and followed the other passengers toward the exit. Most of them were not human. A group of tall blue beings chatted in musical tones, their voices sounded like wind chimes. Near the front, a creature that looked like a walking tree discussed something with what appeared to be a floating jellyfish made of light. Gina had studied the major species in the Federation, but seeing them in person was different. Everything was bigger, stranger, and more colorful than the training videos had shown. She felt very small and very human. The docking bay was enormous. The ceiling stretched so high above that it disappeared into shadows. Hundreds of beings moved around, some walking, some floating, some moving in ways that hurt to look at. The air smelled like metal and ozone, with hints of something sweet that made her nose tingle. A mechanical voice echoed through the bay. All new cadets report to Processing Center Alpha. Follow the blue lights on the floor. Gina looked down and saw a line of blue lights leading away from the docking area. She joined the stream of new arrivals following the path. The beings around her were young. She realized these were all students like her, though most looked nothing like students from Earth. The processing center was a vast hall filled with floating desks and holographic displays. Lines of cadets waited at different stations, sorted by species. Gina found the sign that read Human Integration Program and joined the short line. Only 2 other humans stood ahead of her. The first was a tall man with short black hair and nervous eyes. He kept looking around at the alien cadets with obvious worry. The second was a woman about Gina's age with a confident posture and quick movements. She caught Gina's eye and nodded. "I'm Choi Yuri," the woman said quietly. "You must be Kim, Gina. I read your file during the briefings." Gina nodded back. "Nice to meet you. That's Park Min-soo ahead of us, right?" "Yeah, he's been nervous since we left Earth. Can't say I blame him." Park Min-soo turned around at the sound of his name. His face was pale and sweaty. "Did you see the size of some of these things? There's a cadet over there that's 12 feet tall, 12 feet, and it has 4 arms. Yuri patted his shoulder. "We knew this would be different. That's why we're here." The line moved forward. A floating desk approached them, operated by a being that looked like a collection of silver spheres held together by energy fields. Its voice came from speakers built into the desk. "Human cadets, welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. I am Processing Unit 447. Please present your identification and orders." They handed over their documents. The unit scanned each one with beams of light that made Gina's eyes water. After a few minutes, it handed back small metal tags. "Your dormitory assignments and class schedules are programmed into these tags. Tap them against any information terminal for directions. Your first orientation session begins in 2 hours. Do not be late." The unit floated away before they could ask questions. Gina looked at her tag. It was warm and hummed softly in her hand. They found an information terminal near the exit. When Gina tapped her tag against it, a holographic map appeared in the air. A red dot showed her location, and a green line traced the path to her dormitory. "Looks like we're all in Section C," Yuri said after checking her own tag. "That's something, at least." The corridors of the academy were wide enough for large species to move comfortably. The walls curved upward and glowed with soft light. Moving walkways carried cadets in both directions. Gina saw beings she couldn't identify, some that defied easy description, and others that looked like they belonged in fantasy stories rather than science fiction. Section C turned out to be one of the residential areas. Designed for smaller species, the corridors were more human-sized here, though still larger than anything on Earth. Their rooms were clustered around a common area with comfortable seating and large windows that looked out into space. Gina's room was small but functional. A bed, a desk, storage compartments, and a small bathroom. The walls could display images or information, and the lighting adjusted automatically to her presence. She set her bag on the bed and sat down to think. 3 years ago, she had been training with the Korean Special Forces. Her specialty was close combat and infiltration. She had won championships in Taekwondo, Judo, and mixed martial arts. Her instructors said she had a gift for reading opponents and finding their weaknesses. But here, surrounded by beings with natural armor, multiple limbs, and powers that seemed like magic, she wondered if any of her skills would matter. A chime sounded from her door. She opened it to find Yuri and Min-soo waiting in the corridor. Want to explore before orientation? Yuri asked. I found a map that shows the training facilities. They spent the next hour wandering through the academy. The training areas were impressive, combat simulators that could create any environment, weapons ranges that stretched for miles, zero-gravity chambers for space combat practice, medical facilities that could treat any known species. In the main combat training hall, they stopped to watch a practice session. Cadets from different species sparred with each other under the supervision of instructors. Most of the matches were mismatched. Large, powerful beings dominated smaller, quicker ones. Natural advantages seemed to determine the outcomes. One match caught Gina's attention. A cadet that looked like he was made of living crystal faced off against a four-armed opponent, the crystal being moved slowly but hit with tremendous force. Each blow sounded like a hammer striking an anvil. The four-armed cadet tried to use speed and multiple attacks, but the crystal cadet's natural armor protected him from most damage. Lee Hoon Minsu whispered, reading from his information tag. Altarian species. Known for their crystalline exoskeleton and incredible strength. The match ended quickly. Lee Hyun's opponent yielded after taking too much damage. The crystal cadet raised his arms in victory, and the other cadets watching made sounds that might have been applause. Lee Hyun looked around the training hall with obvious pride. His eyes passed over the three humans watching from the entrance. For a moment, Gina thought she saw something like amusement in his expression, or maybe it was pity. Come on, Yuri said quietly. We should get ready for orientation. As they walked back toward their dormitories, Gina couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, not just by Lee Hyun, but by many of the alien cadets they passed. Some looked curious, others looked skeptical, a few looked like they were trying not to laugh. She understood why. Humans were new to the galactic community. They had no natural armor, no extra limbs, no special powers. From the outside, they probably looked like the weakest species in the academy. Gina smiled to herself. She had been underestimated before. It usually didn't end well for the other person. The orientation session would begin soon. Her real education was about to start. The orientation hall could fit a small city inside it. Thousands of cadets filled the floating seats that adjusted automatically to each species size and shape. Gina sat between Yuri and Minsu, feeling like a tiny dot in an ocean of alien forms. Above them, a massive holographic display showed the Academy's emblem, rotating slowly. Instructor Vextel floated onto the central stage. He looked like a giant mantis made of dark metal, with 4 arms and eyes that glowed green. His voice boomed through the hall without any visible speakers. Welcome to the Galactic Military Academy. You represent 847 different species from across the known galaxy. You are here because your worlds believe you have what it takes to serve in the Federation Defense Force. The instructor's lower arms gestured toward the display, which now showed images of famous battles from galactic history. Ships exploded in silent fury. Ground forces clashed on alien worlds. Heroes from dozens of species fought and died for the Federation. War is not a game, Vextel continued. The enemies of the Federation show no mercy to the weak. They respect only strength, skill, and the will to fight. Some of you will discover you lack these qualities. Those cadets will be sent home before they can endanger their squad mates. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Gina noticed that many of the alien cadets looked confident, even eager. Their species had been fighting galactic wars for centuries. They knew their place in the military hierarchy. Combat training begins tomorrow, the instructor said. You will learn to fight alongside beings very different from yourselves. You will discover that natural advantages mean nothing without proper training. You will also learn that some species are simply not suited for military service. His glowing eyes seemed to scan the crowd. When they passed over the human section, Gina felt a chill. The Academy has recently begun accepting cadets from newly discovered species. This is an experiment. Some experiments succeed, others fail, quickly and decisively. More murmurs rippled through the hall. Several alien cadets turned to look at the humans. Their expressions ranged from curious to dismissive. Your first lesson is this, Vextel announced. Know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and know your limits. The cadets who survive this program will be those who understand what they can and cannot do. The orientation continued for another hour. Different instructors explained academy rules, training schedules, and academic requirements. Gina tried to pay attention, but she kept noticing the looks from other cadets. Some seemed friendly enough, others looked like predators, sizing up prey. After the session ended, the cadets filed out through multiple exits. The human group stayed together, following signs toward the cafeteria. The corridors buzzed with conversation in dozens of languages. Translation devices helped, but many concepts didn't translate well between species. The cafeteria was another enormous space with sections designed for different dietary needs. Carnivore stations served raw meat and blood-based drinks. Herbivore areas offered plant matter from hundreds of worlds. Energy-feeding species clustered around glowing pools of liquid light. The humans found a section marked omnivore compatible and selected foods that looked somewhat familiar. Gina chose something that resembled chicken and vegetables that might have been related to earth plants. The taste was close enough to be edible. They found an empty table near a large window that showed the academy's exterior. Other cadet groups sat at nearby tables, creating a mix of sounds, smells, and languages that made Gina's head spin. "This is overwhelming," Minsu said quietly. He had barely touched his food. "Did you hear what that instructor said? About experiments failing quickly, he was trying to scare us," Yuri replied. "Standard military intimidation tactics. My father used similar techniques when he trained recruits." Before Gina could respond, a shadow fell across their table. She looked up to see Li Heian standing beside them. Up close, his crystalline skin looked like living diamond. Each plate of his natural armor was perfectly formed and razor-sharp at the edges. He stood over 8 feet tall and probably weighed as much as all 3 humans combined. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. His voice sounded like rocks grinding together, but the translation made his words clear. 2 more cadets flanked him. One was covered in gray stone-like skin with 4 muscular arms. The other appeared to be made of flowing water, held in a roughly humanoid shape. All 3 looked down at the humans with expressions that were hard to read. "Sure," Yuri said carefully. Li Haiyan's massive form settled into a chair that groaned under his weight. His companions remained standing. "So you're the humans everyone's talking about. The new experiment. We're cadets, just like you," Gina said. Li Hyun made a sound that might have been laughter. "Just like us. Look around this cafeteria. Human, what do you see?" Gina followed his gesture. At one table, cadets with thick shells practiced combat, moves that could crush steel. At another, beings with multiple heads discussed battle tactics in perfect synchronization. Near the window, a group that looked like living fire communicated through color changes. "I see students learning to work together," Gina said. "You see predators and prey," Li Heian corrected. "Every species here earned their place through strength. The Petrans can punch through starship hulls." He nodded toward his stone-skinned companion. "The Aquari can reshape their bodies to avoid any attack." The water being rippled in acknowledgement. "My people's armor can stop plasma cannons." He leaned forward, making the table creak. "What can your species do? You have no natural weapons, no armor, no special abilities. You're not even particularly fast or strong compared to baseline galactic standards." Minsu shrank back in his chair. Yuri's jaw tightened, but she stayed silent. Gina met Li Haiyan's glowing eyes directly. "We adapt," she said simply. "Adapt." Li Haiyan's laughter sounded like crystals breaking. "Adaptation is what weak species do when they can't compete directly. It's a survival mechanism, not a military advantage." Other tables had gone quiet. Dozens of alien cadets watched the exchange with interest. Some looked amused. Others seemed to be waiting for something to happen. "The Academy accepts humans because the Federation wants to be inclusive," Li Heian continued. "But inclusivity and military effectiveness are different things. When we're in actual combat situations, do you think enemies will care about giving humans time to adapt?" The stone-skinned cadet spoke for the first time. His voice was deep and gravelly. "On Petra, we have a saying. The mountain does not bend for the wind. Strength endures. Everything else breaks." "Exactly," Jankisu Li Heian agreed. "In combat, there's no substitute for natural advantages. Training can improve what you already have, but it can't create abilities that don't exist." The water being flowed closer to the table. When it spoke, its voice was like waves on a beach. "Perhaps the humans have hidden strengths. Many species appear weak until tested." "Thank you, Wu Doyon," Yuri said carefully. Li Heian shook his crystalline head. "Doyon is being polite. But tomorrow, when combat training begins, politeness won't matter. You'll be paired against cadets who could accidentally kill you while holding back." He stood up, his massive form casting shadows across the table. I don't mean to be cruel. I'm trying to save you from unnecessary pain. There's no shame in realizing you're not suited for military service. Many species find other ways to contribute to the Federation." As he turned to leave, Li Hyun paused. "If you do stay for combat training, try to get paired with someone gentle. Some of us might forget to hold back properly." The 3 aliens walked away, leaving the humans in uncomfortable silence. Around them, conversations gradually resumed, but Gina could feel eyes still watching their table. "Well, that was friendly," Yuri muttered. Minsu pushed his food around. His plate. "Maybe he has a point. Did you see his skin? I bet our punches would just bounce off." "He's trying to intimidate us," Gina said. "It's a classic bully tactic. Make the target doubt themselves before the real test begins." "But what if he's right?" Minsu asked. "What if we really don't belong here?" Gina looked around the cafeteria again. She saw beings with incredible natural gifts, evolved for combat. On harsh worlds, they had claws, armor, extra limbs, and abilities that seemed magical. Compared to them, humans did look weak and fragile, but she had learned. something important during her years of combat training on Earth. The most dangerous opponents were often the ones who looked harmless. The fighters who won weren't always the strongest or fastest. They were the ones who understood combat better than their enemies did. "Tomorrow, we'll find out," she said quietly, "but I think Lee Hyun might be in for a surprise." Yuri smiled. "For the first time since the confrontation, I hope you're right. I really want to see that smug crystal face when he realizes he was wrong." Outside the windows, the academy rotated slowly against the starfield. Somewhere in its training halls, instructors prepared challenges that would test every cadet's limits. Tomorrow would bring their first real test. Gina finished her meal and tried not to think about how many ways the combat training could go wrong. Instead, she thought about all the opponents who had underestimated her in the past. Most of them had learned their mistake too late. The combat training hall was 3 times larger than any gymnasium on Earth. The ceiling stretched up into shadows, and the walls were covered with weapon racks, protective gear, and training equipment that looked more like torture devices. The floor was made of some kind of material that could absorb tremendous impacts without damage. Gina stood with the other human cadets near the entrance, watching as alien species filled the space. The morning air smelled like metal and cleaning chemicals. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of heavy objects being dropped repeatedly. Instructor Vextel floated into the center of the hall. His 4 arms moved in complex patterns. As he activated holographic displays around the room, training circles appeared on the floor, marked with glowing lines. Weapon racks descended from the ceiling. Practice dummies materialized from hidden projectors. "Today you begin real combat training," the instructor announced. His voice echoed from every surface. "Everything you have learned before this moment was preparation. Now you will discover what it means to fight for your life." The assembled cadets grew quiet. Even the most confident ones seemed to understand that something serious was about to begin. "Combat in the Federation Defense Force is not about personal glory," Vextal continued. "It is about protecting your squadmates, completing your mission, and surviving to fight another day. Cadets who cannot do these things will be removed from the program." He gestured toward the training circles. "You will be paired with other cadets for sparring exercises. These matches will help us evaluate your current skill level and identify areas for improvement. Some of you will perform better than expected, others will disappoint us." Gina felt eyes turning toward the human section. She kept her expression neutral, but her heart was beating faster. "Safety protocols are in effect," the instructor added. "Medical drones will monitor all matches. Serious injuries will result in immediate termination of the exercise. However, minor injuries are expected and accepted. Pain is an excellent teacher." The holographic displays began showing pairing assignments. Names appeared in alien scripts alongside their translation. Gina watched as cadets moved toward their assigned training circles. Park Minsu, human, versus Terran, Centaurian. The display announced. Minsu went pale. His opponent was a horse-like being with 6 legs and arms that ended in sharp hooves. Terran looked friendly enough, but her species was known for incredible speed and strength. Choi Yuri, human, versus Velter, crystalline, appeared next. Yuri's opponent was similar to Lee Hyun, but smaller and more agile-looking. Velter nodded respectfully to Yuri as they moved toward their circle. Gina waited for her name to appear. The display cycled through dozens of pairings. Finally, her assignment appeared. Kim Gina, human, no current assignment. Report to standby area. She frowned. Every other cadet had received a pairing. She walked to the designated standby area, which was just a section of floor marked with yellow lines. The first matches began. Gina watched Minsu try to stay away from Terran's powerful hooves. The Centaurian was clearly holding back, but even her restrained movements were faster than Minsu could follow. The match ended quickly with Minsu on the ground, winded but unhurt. Yuri did better against Velter. The crystalline moved slowly and telegraphed his attacks. Yuri managed to avoid most of his strikes and even landed a few hits of her own, but her punches had no effect on his armor-like skin. The match ended when Yuri became too tired to continue dodging. Other matches around the hall followed similar patterns. Larger, more powerful species dominated smaller ones. Natural advantages decided most outcomes within minutes. In the circle nearest to Gina, Lee Hyun faced off against Jang Kisu, the 4-armed stone-skinned cadet from the previous day. This match was different from the others. Both fighters were powerful and naturally armored. Their strikes sounded like hammers hitting anvils. Lee Hyun moved with surprising grace for his size. His crystalline plates shifted and adjusted as he fought, creating better angles for attack and defense. Jang Kisu used his 4 arms to create complex attack patterns, but Lee Hyun's superior reach and strength gradually wore him down. The match ended when Lee Hyun caught 2 of Jang Kisu's arms and used them to throw the stone-skinned cadet across the circle. Jang Kisu hit the ground hard and stayed down for several seconds before getting up. Lee Hyun raised his arms in victory. The watching cadets made various sounds of approval. Several instructors nodded and made notes on their floating tablets. Excellent technique, Cadet Lee Hyun. Instructor Vextel announced, your species' natural advantages combined with proper training make you a formidable opponent. Lee Hyun basked in the praise. His crystalline skin seemed to glow brighter with satisfaction. He looked around the training hall, clearly enjoying the attention. That's when his eyes found Gina standing in the standby area. Instructor, Lee Hyun called out, his voice carrying across the hall. I notice one of the humans doesn't have a sparring partner. Conversations around the hall quieted. Other cadets turned to look at Gina, then at Lee Hyun. Instructor Vextel's glowing eyes focused on the standby area. Cadet Kim Gina was not assigned a partner due to safety concerns. Her physical specifications suggest she would be at significant risk against most opponents. Lee Hyun made the crystal breaking sound that served as his laughter. Instructor, wouldn't it be educational for the human to experience actual combat training? How else will she learn her limitations? More instructors floated over to observe the conversation. Gina could feel hundreds of eyes watching her. Some cadets looked curious, others seemed amused. A few appeared concerned. I would be happy to provide that education. Lee Hyun continued, I promise to be very careful. My species understands the importance of protecting fragile allies. The word fragile echoed through the hall. Several alien cadets made sounds. That might have been laughter. Instructor Vextel considered the request. The safety protocols would need to be set to maximum sensitivity. Any sign of serious injury would end the match immediately. Of course, Lee Hyun agreed. I simply want to help our human colleagues understand what they're facing. It's better to learn these lessons in a controlled environment. Gina felt anger building in her chest. Lee Hyun wasn't offering to help. He was offering to humiliate her in front of the entire class. He wanted to prove his point about human weakness in the most public way possible. She could refuse. The instructors would probably be relieved. No one expected her to accept such an obviously unfair match, but refusing would confirm everything Lee Hyun had said about humans. It would mark her as weak and afraid. Every future interaction with alien cadets would be colored by that moment of backing down. Gina stepped forward. I accept the match. The hall went completely silent. Even the background sounds of other training exercises seemed to stop. Cadet Kim Gina, Instructor Vextel said carefully, you understand that this is not a required exercise. You have nothing to prove by accepting this challenge. I understand, Gina replied, but I'm here to learn combat techniques. This seems like a good opportunity. Lee Hyun's glow intensified. Excellent. I look forward to the educational experience. The instructors moved quickly to set up the match. Medical drones positioned themselves around a training circle. Safety barriers activated. Warning lights began flashing to indicate a high-risk exercise. Gina walked to one side of the circle. Lee Hyun took position on the other side. The size difference was dramatic. He looked like a giant crystal statue. She looked like a child who had wandered into the wrong place. Final safety check, Instructor Vextel announced. Cadet Lee Hyun, you will maintain minimum force protocols at all times. Any strike above level 2 intensity will result in immediate disqualification. Understood, Lee Hyun replied. I wouldn't want to accidentally hurt our human friend. The other cadets gathered around the circle. Yuri and Minsu pushed through the crowd to get closer. Yuri's face was tight with worry. Minsu looked like he might be sick. This is stupid, Yuri whispered urgently. You don't have to do this. Gina looked at her friend, then at the hundreds of alien faces watching from around the circle. Some looked excited, others seemed to be waiting for entertainment. A few appeared genuinely concerned for her safety. Yeah, she said quietly, I do. She stepped into the circle and took a ready stance. Lee Hyun moved to the center, his massive form casting shadows across half the training area. Medical systems active, announced a mechanical voice. Safety protocols engaged. Match will begin in 10 seconds. Gina focused on her breathing. She had been in situations like this before. David versus Goliath. The small fighter against the giant. The outcome wasn't always what people expected. 5 seconds. Lee Hyun smiled, his crystalline features reflecting the training hall's lights. Don't worry, little human, this will be over quickly. 3, 2, 1, begin. The match started, and with it, everything the galaxy thought it knew about humans was about to change. Lee Hyun moved first, just as Gina expected he would. His attack was slow and careful, designed to show his restraint rather than cause damage. His massive crystalline fist came toward her face like a falling boulder. Gina wasn't there when it arrived. She had shifted left at the last moment, moving just enough to let the punch pass by her head. The wind from Lee Hyun's strike ruffled her hair, but his knuckles found only empty air. A murmur ran through the watching crowd. Lee Hyun looked surprised for a moment, then smiled wider. Good reflexes, he said, turning to face her new position. But you can't run forever, little human. He attacked again, this time with his other hand. Another controlled strike aimed at her shoulder. Again, Gina moved just enough to avoid contact. She didn't run or jump dramatically. She simply wasn't where he expected her to be. The crowd grew quieter. Some of the alien cadets leaned forward to get a better view. Li Haiyan's third attack was faster. His patience was starting to fade. This punch came straight at Gina's chest with enough force to knock her across the circle. Gina stepped back and, to the side, the punch missed by inches. As Li Haiyan's momentum carried him forward, she moved around his extended arm like water flowing around a rock. Now she was behind him. Li Haiyan spun quickly, faster than most beings his size could manage. But Gina had already moved again. She circled him continuously, staying just out of range, studying his movements with intense focus. "Stand still and fight," Li Haiyan growled. His controlled demeanor was cracking. This is supposed to be combat training, not a running exercise. Some of the watching cadets made sounds of agreement. Others seemed fascinated by what they were seeing. A few instructors exchanged glances and began taking notes. Gina continued to circle. She watched how Li Haiyan's weight shifted when he prepared to attack. She noted which direction he favored when turning. She observed how his crystalline plates moved and adjusted during combat. Li Haiyan launched a series of rapid punches, trying to overwhelm her with speed. His fists cut through the air like pistons. Any one of them could have ended the match if it connected. None of them connected. Gina flowed between the attacks like she was dancing. She ducked under high punches and stepped aside from low ones. Her movements looked effortless, but every dodge was perfectly timed and precisely calculated. The hall had gone completely silent except for the sound of Li Haiyan's attacks cutting through air. "Impossible," someone whispered. The translation system made the word audible to everyone. Li Haiyan stopped attacking and stepped back. His crystalline skin was beginning to show stress fractures from his exertion. His breathing was heavy and labored. "You're just delaying the inevitable," he said, but his voice carried less certainty than before. "Sooner or later, you'll make a mistake." Gina stopped circling and faced him directly for the first time since the match began. "You're right," she said calmly. "Someone will make a mistake." Li Haiyan's eyes narrowed. "Are you mocking me?" "I'm studying you," Gina replied. "Your species has incredible natural advantages. But natural advantages can become weaknesses if you rely on them too much." The watching crowd stirred. Several instructors moved closer to the training circle. Li Haiyan's anger flared. Enough games. He charged forward with both arms extended, trying to grab Gina in a bear hug that would end the match instantly. His approach was direct and overwhelming, the kind of attack that had defeated every opponent he had ever faced. Gina didn't dodge this time. Instead, she stepped forward to meet his charge. Li Haiyan's eyes widened in surprise as she moved toward him rather than away. For a split second, he hesitated, confused by her unexpected reaction. That hesitation was all Gina needed. She dropped low and swept her leg behind Li Haiyan's leading foot just as his weight came down. His massive form, already committed to the forward charge, suddenly had nothing to land on. Li Haiyan stumbled. His perfect balance disappeared. His arms windmilled as he tried to recover, but momentum and gravity were working against him. Gina moved past him like a shadow. As he fell forward, she placed one hand on his back and pushed gently, adding just enough force to ensure he couldn't recover. Li Haiyan crashed to the training mat with a sound like a mountain falling. The impact shook the entire circle. Dust rose from where his crystalline body hit the ground. The silence that followed was absolute. Li Haiyan lay on the mat for several seconds, staring at the ceiling with an expression of complete bewilderment. Slowly, carefully, he rolled over and pushed himself to his hands and knees. "How?" he said quietly. Gina stood nearby, barely breathing hard. "Leverage," she replied. "No matter how strong you are, physics still applies." Li Haiyan got to his feet. His crystalline skin showed several new stress fractures from the fall. He looked at Gina like she was some kind of puzzle he couldn't solve. "That was luck," he said. "A fluke. It won't happen again." "Probably not," Gina agreed. "You'll be more careful now, but I'll adapt." The word adapt hung in the air like a challenge. Around the circle, alien cadets whispered to each other in dozens of languages. Some looked excited. Others appeared disturbed. Li Haiyan set himself in a new stance, this one more defensive and balanced. "Let's continue." For the next several minutes, the match became a careful dance. Li Haiyan attacked with more precision and control. Gina continued to avoid his strikes while looking for new opportunities. She found one when he overextended during a particularly powerful punch. This time, instead of dodging completely, she redirected his arm using his own momentum. Li Haiyan's fist sailed past its intended target and carried him off balance again. Gina could have followed up with a counterattack, but the safety protocols were clear. Instead, she simply stepped back and waited for him to recover. The pattern repeated. Several more times, Li Haiyan would attack with confidence and precision. Gina would turn his strength against him, using leverage and timing to neutralize his advantages. By the end of the match, Li Haiyan was breathing heavily and showing multiple stress fractures. Gina looked like she had just finished a light warm-up. Exercise. Time, Instructor Vextel announced. Match concluded. Lee Hyun straightened slowly. He looked at Gina with a mixture of respect and confusion. I don't understand. You never attacked, you just moved. Sometimes the best defense is making your opponent defeat themselves, Gina replied. She walked to the edge of the circle where Yuri and Minsu waited with expressions of amazement. Around them, the watching crowd buzzed with excited conversation. That was incredible, Yuri whispered. Where did you learn to fight like that? Earth, Gina said simply. We've had a lot of practice. As they left the training circle, Gina could feel hundreds of eyes following her movement. The looks were different now. Less dismissive, more cautious. She had just shown the academy that humans might not be as helpless as everyone assumed. The real question was what would happen next. The next morning brought a different atmosphere to the academy. Word of the previous day's match had spread through every section and species group. In the corridors, alien cadets stopped their conversations when humans passed by. Some nodded respectfully, others stared with obvious curiosity. Gina walked to the training hall with Yuri and Minsu, trying to ignore the attention. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Lee Hyun's confused expression and heard the whispers of the watching crowd. You're famous, Yuri said as they entered the hall. I heard 3 different species arguing about what happened yesterday. Some think it was skill. Others think it was luck. A few think it was impossible, Minsu added. Apparently, some of the instructors spent half the night reviewing the recordings. The training hall was arranged differently today. Instead of multiple sparring circles, there was one large central area surrounded by observation platforms. Advanced holographic recording equipment floated overhead. This wasn't going to be a simple practice session. Instructor Vextel waited in the center of the space. Several other instructors flanked him, representing different species and combat specialties. Their attention was focused on the human section as cadets filed in. Yesterday's exercises revealed interesting data, Vextel announced once everyone was assembled. Some cadets performed better than expected. Others showed surprising weaknesses. Today we will explore these findings more thoroughly. Gina felt a chill. She had a feeling she knew where this was heading. Cadet Kim Gina, the instructor called, please report to the central area. The crowd of watching cadets grew quiet. Gina walked down to the training floor, aware that every eye in the hall was following her movement. Your performance yesterday was unusual, Vextel continued. Your ability to neutralize a significantly stronger opponent without using direct force suggests combat techniques unknown to our databases. More instructors floated down from the observation areas. Gina counted at least a dozen, representing species she had never seen before. Some carried recording devices. Others had weapons. That probably served as scanning equipment. We would like to conduct a more comprehensive evaluation, Vextel said. You will face multiple opponents under controlled conditions. This will help us understand whether yesterday's results can be replicated. How many opponents? Gina asked. 3, came the reply, each representing different combat styles and natural advantages. The first opponent entered the central area. It was Velter, the crystalline who had fought Yuri the day before. He moved carefully but confidently, clearly believing he would not suffer the same fate as Lee. And Velter specializes in defensive combat, Vextel explained. His approach is more cautious than Lee Hyun's. Let us see how you adapt. The match began immediately. Velter did not charge forward like Lee Hyun had. Instead, he waited for Gina to make the first move. Gina circled him slowly, studying his stance and defensive positioning. Velter turned to track her movement but did not attack. His crystalline plates were positioned to protect his vital areas, while allowing quick responses to threats. After a full minute of circling, Gina made her first move. She feinted toward Velter's left side, then quickly shifted right. Velter responded correctly, adjusting his defense to meet the real attack direction. But Gina's right side approach was also a feint. Her actual attack came from below, a low sweep aimed at destabilizing his base. Velter tried to step back, but Gina had anticipated the movement. She followed through with a precise push that sent him stumbling. Backward, Velter recovered quickly and reset his defensive stance. Clever, he admitted, but I'm ready for that technique now. Gina smiled. Good, that means you're learning. What followed was a chess match of movement and counter-movement. Velter defended against everything Gina tried, but he couldn't mount an effective counterattack. Every time he committed to an offensive move, Gina turned his momentum against him. The match ended when Velter became too frustrated with his inability to land a hit. He made an over-aggressive lunge that left him completely off balance. Gina simply stepped aside and let him fall. Remarkable, one of the observing instructors muttered. The second opponent was already entering the area. This one was Terran, the 6-legged Centaurian who had defeated Minsu. Her approach would be completely different from the defensive crystalline's. Terran represents speed-based combat, Vextel announced. Her species can move faster than most others can react. Adaptation becomes much more difficult when you cannot predict your opponent's position. Terran took position across from Gina. Her 6 legs shifted restlessly, ready to propel her in any direction at incredible speed. I watched your other matches, Terran said. You use patience and timing against slow opponents. Let's see how you handle real speed. The match began, and Terran immediately proved her point. She moved like lightning, appearing first on Gina's left, then right, then behind her in rapid succession. Her attacks came from unexpected angles at speeds that seemed impossible. For the first minute, Gina could barely keep up. She dodged desperately, often by the smallest margins. Several attacks came close enough to ruffle her clothing, but gradually, patterns began to emerge. Terran's speed was incredible, but it followed predictable laws of physics. She had to plant her legs to change direction. She needed space to build momentum. Her attacks, while fast, still had to come from specific angles to be effective. Gina stopped trying to track Terran's movement and started predicting where she would be. Instead of reacting to attacks, she began positioning herself where the attacks wouldn't come. The change was subtle but decisive. Terran's strikes began missing. By larger margins, her follow-up attacks found empty space. Her speed advantage was being neutralized by superior positioning. The end came when Terran attempted a complex maneuver that required her to leap over Gina while attacking downward. Gina simply wasn't where Terran expected her to be. The landed awkwardly and stumbled forward. Gina could have exploited the opening, but the safety protocols prevented any aggressive counterattacks. Instead, she just stepped back and waited. Impossible, Terran said, breathing hard. You moved like you knew where I was going before I did. I did, Gina replied. Speed, without unpredictability, is just fast movement. The third opponent was the largest yet. Jang Kisu, the 4-armed stone-skinned cadet, entered the area with obvious determination. His defeat by Li Hyun the previous day had clearly motivated him to prove himself. Jang Kisu represents overwhelming force, Vextel announced. His species combines strength, durability, and multiple attack vectors. This will be your most challenging test. Jang Kisu cracked his knuckles on all 4 hands. The sound echoed through the hall like breaking rocks. I've been thinking about your techniques, he said. I believe I understand your strategy now. Do you? Gina asked. You use an opponent's advantages against them. You turn strength into weakness and speed into liability. But what happens when your opponent doesn't rely on those advantages? It was a good question. Jang Kisu had clearly studied her previous matches and developed a strategy. He would not charge recklessly or rely purely on natural gifts. The match began with both fighters moving cautiously. Jang Kisu used his 4 arms to create complex defensive patterns while advancing slowly. His stone skin could absorb tremendous punishment, so he didn't need to avoid contact completely. Gina tried her usual tactics, but Jang Kisu was ready for them. He didn't overcommit to attacks. He maintained perfect balance. He used his multiple arms to guard against leverage-based techniques. For several minutes, neither fighter gained a clear advantage. Jang Kisu's defensive approach prevented Gina from using his strength against him, but his caution also prevented him from mounting effective attacks. The stalemate continued until Jang Kisu made a critical error. Frustrated by his inability to land a decisive blow, he attempted a 4-handed grab designed to capture Gina, regardless of which direction she dodged. It was exactly the kind of overcommitment Gina had been waiting for. Instead of dodging away from the grab, she stepped forward and slightly to the side. 2 of Jang Kisu's arms closed on empty air. The other 2 tangled with each other as he tried to adjust. For just a moment, Jang Kisu was off balance and partially restrained by his own limbs. Jina moved with precision born from years of training. She grabbed Jang Kisu's extended right arm at the wrist and elbow. Using his forward momentum and her leverage advantage, she applied a classic joint lock. The sound that followed would echo through the academy for days to come. It started as a crack, like a stone splitting under pressure. Then it became a grinding, breaking sound as Jang Kisu's arm bent in a direction it was never meant to go. The stone-skinned cadet's roar of pain and shock filled the training hall. He dropped to one knee, clutching his damaged arm with his other 3 hands. Medical drones swarmed the area immediately. Emergency lights flashed. The match was declared over before Jang Kisu hit the ground. In the stunned silence that followed, one word echoed through the hall: impossible. But this time, it wasn't a word of disbelief. It was a word of recognition. The humans weren't weak. They were something else entirely. The medical bay was quieter than Gina expected. The walls glowed with soft blue light that was supposed to be calming, but she felt anything but calm. Medical drones floated around Jang Kisu's bed, working to repair his damaged arm with tools that looked like a combination of surgery and engineering. The bone structure is more complex than our initial scans indicated, one of the medical units announced. Repair time will be extended to accommodate the unique mineral composition. Gina sat in a chair beside the bed, watching the repair process. She had asked to be present when Jankisu woke up. The instructors had agreed, though they seemed puzzled by her request. Jankisu's eyes opened slowly. The pain medication made his movements sluggish, but his mind was clearly alert. He looked at his arm, which was wrapped in some kind of regenerative field, then at Gina. "You came to check on me," he said. His voice was quiet and thoughtful. "I wanted to apologize," Gina replied. "I didn't mean to cause that much damage. I thought your arm could handle more stress." Jankisu tried to sit up, winced, and settled back against the medical bed. "How much do you know about stone skin anatomy?" "Almost nothing," Gina admitted. "Our databases have basic information, but nothing detailed about structural weaknesses." "That's what I thought." Jankisu looked at his wrapped arm again. "Do you know what you did to me?" Gina shook her head. "You found the exact point where my natural armor transitions from flexible to rigid. Every stone skin has these transition points, but they're different for each individual. Finding them requires either detailed anatomical knowledge or," he paused, studying Gina's face, "or incredible sensitivity to structural mechanics," he finished. "You felt where my arm was weakest, just by touching it." Before Gina could respond, the medical bay doors opened. Instructor Vextel floated in, followed by several other instructors and a being Gina had never seen before. The newcomer was tall and thin, with skin that seemed to be made of flowing silver metal. "Cadet Kim Gina," Vextel said. "This is Commander Thalanis, head of combat training for the Academy." Commander Thalanis moved closer to Gina's chair. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes. "I've been reviewing recordings of your matches. Your techniques are unlike anything in our combat databases." "They're human techniques," Gina said simply. "Yes, but that raises important questions. Your species has only recently joined the galactic community. According to our records, Earth had no interstellar conflicts and limited military technology, yet you demonstrate combat skills that our most advanced warrior species would find impressive." Commander Thalanis activated a holographic display above Jankisu's bed. It showed slow-motion footage of Gina's match, focusing on the moment she applied the joint lock. "This technique requires precise knowledge of anatomy, leverage principles, and timing that would take most species decades to develop. How did your species acquire this knowledge?" Gina looked at the recording, then at the faces watching her. All of them seemed genuinely puzzled. "We fought each other," she said. The silence that followed was uncomfortable. "Could you elaborate?" Commander Thalanis asked carefully. Gina thought about how to explain human history to beings who had never experienced anything like it. Most species develop their combat skills fighting external threats, different environments, hostile creatures, other species. Humans are different. We've been fighting other humans for thousands of years. She gestured toward the holographic display. "Every technique I used today was developed to fight beings exactly like me. Same strength, same speed, same intelligence. When you can't rely on natural advantages, you have to get creative. Your species fights itself." One of the observing instructors asked. The translation system made his tone sound shocked. "Constantly," Gina replied. "Wars, competitions, training, self-defense. We've spent our entire history learning how to defeat opponents who are just as smart and adaptable as we are." Commander Thalanis exchanged glances with the other instructors. Several of them were taking notes rapidly. "This is unprecedented," Vextel said. "Most species achieve internal unity before developing interstellar travel. Continued interspecies conflict suggests either severe social dysfunction," or he paused, clearly struggling with an uncomfortable thought, "or extreme adaptability pressure." Commander Thalanis finished. "Your species became dangerous not through evolution, but through necessity." From his medical bed, Jankisu spoke up. "She knew exactly how to break my arm, not just how to apply force, but where to apply it and how much pressure was needed. That level of knowledge doesn't come from textbooks, it comes from practice," Gina said quietly. "Humans have been perfecting the art of fighting other humans. For millennia, we know how bodies work because we've spent so much time learning how to break them." The room fell silent again. Several instructors looked disturbed by this revelation. "How many combat styles does your species practice?" Commander Thalanis asked. Gina thought for a moment. "Hundreds, maybe thousands. Every culture developed their own approaches. We have systems for fighting with weapons, without weapons, in confined spaces, in water, in the air. We study anatomy, psychology, physics, chemistry, anything that can give us an advantage." "Against your own kind," Vextel repeated, as if he couldn't quite believe it. "Primarily, yes. Other species have natural weapons or armor or special abilities. Humans just have our brains and our bodies, but we learn to use them better than anyone else." Commander Thalanis deactivated the holographic display. "This information changes our entire assessment of human military potential. We assumed your species was fragile and inexperienced. Instead, you may be the most combat-experienced species we've ever encountered." She turned to address the other instructors. I want complete reviews of all human combat databases, cross-reference with historical records and tactical analyses. If their entire species has been engaged in continuous warfare for thousands of years, we need to understand the implications. As the instructors filed out to begin their research, Commander Thelonous remained behind. She looked at Gina with an expression that was hard to read. "One more question," she said. "In your opinion, how would an average human fighter perform against galactic opponents?" Gina considered the question carefully. Most humans would struggle against natural advantages like armor or multiple limbs. But if they had time to study their opponents and develop specific techniques, she shrugged. Humans are good at finding weaknesses. It's what we do, even against opponents much larger and stronger. Especially against opponents much larger and stronger. Those are the ones we've had the most practice with. Commander nodded slowly. "I see. Thank you for your honesty." After she left, Gina sat alone with Jankisu. The medical drones had finished their work and moved on to other patients. "You realize what just happened?" Jankisu asked. "I think so. They're starting to understand that humans might not be the weak newcomers everyone assumed." "More than that," Jankisu said, carefully flexing his repaired arm. "They're realizing that your species might be the most dangerous one in the academy." Through the medical bay windows, Gina could see the academy, rotating slowly against the starfield. Somewhere in its corridors and training halls, instructors were frantically reviewing everything they thought they knew about humans. The revelation was just beginning to spread. Soon, the entire galactic community would understand that Earth's newest members weren't clients to be protected. They were warriors who had been forged in the furnace of eternal conflict. And they were just getting started. 3 weeks had passed since Jankisu's arm was broken. The academy felt different now. Conversations stopped when humans walked by, but the silence carried respect rather than dismissal. Alien cadets asked questions about Earth combat techniques. Instead of making jokes about human weakness, Gina sat in the observation deck overlooking the main training hall. Below, she could see Yuri teaching a group of crystalline cadets how to use leverage instead of brute force. Minsu was demonstrating pressure point techniques to fascinated Centaurians who had never considered targeting nerve clusters. The Academy's entire combat curriculum was being revised. Human instructors had been requested from Earth. New training programs were being developed. The revelation about human warfare had changed everything. "Mind if I join you?" Gina turned to see Li Hyun approaching. His crystalline skin showed faint repair lines where stress fractures had been fixed. He moved more carefully now, with less of the casual confidence he had displayed before. "Of course," Gina said, gesturing to an empty chair. Li Hyun settled down beside her, his weight making the chair creak. For several minutes, they watched the training sessions below in comfortable silence. "I've been thinking about our match," Li Hyun said eventually, trying to understand what happened. "What conclusions did you reach?" "That I'm an idiot," Li Hyun replied with what might have been humor. "I saw a small, soft creature and assumed it was helpless. I never considered that appearance might be deceiving." Below them, a group of stone-skinned cadets was learning how to fall properly to avoid joint damage. The instructor was a human woman who demonstrated techniques with patient precision. "My species has a concept called crystal pride," Li continued. "We believe our natural advantages make us superior warriors. But watching these new training sessions, I'm starting to understand that advantages can become weaknesses." "How so?" "We never learned to fight dirty because we never had to. Our armor protects us, so we never developed evasion techniques. Our strength intimidates opponents, so we never learned subtlety." He paused. "Humans had to learn all of those things because you had no other choice." A new group entered the training area. These were senior cadets from multiple species, working together on complex combat scenarios. Human techniques had been integrated into their standard procedures. The results were impressive. "The instructors are calling it the human revolution," Li Hyun said, "combat training that focuses on skill and adaptation rather than natural gifts." Some of the older instructors are resistant, but the results speak for themselves. "What kind of results?" "Mixed species teams perform 40% better when they include human tactical advisors. Individual fighters improve their effectiveness by an average of 60% after human training. And most importantly, casualty rates in simulation exercises have dropped dramatically." Gina watched a Quadrian cadet successfully pin a much larger opponent using a technique that looked suspiciously like jujitsu. "Humans aren't better fighters than other species," she said. "We just approach combat differently." "You approach everything differently," Li Hyun corrected. "I've been reading about Earth history. Your species has been in continuous conflict for thousands of years, but you've also created incredible art, literature, and philosophy. Most species achieve peace through dominance or submission. Humans seem to thrive on controlled conflict." The observation deck doors opened, and Commander Thelonous entered. She nodded to both cadets before joining them at the viewing window. "Cadet Kim Gina," she said, "I wanted to update you on recent developments." Gina waited politely. The Galactic Federation Council has received preliminary reports about human combat capabilities. The response has been ... significant. Commander Thalanus activated a holographic display showing star maps and fleet movements. 3 major military academies have requested human instructors. The Federation Defense Force wants to establish joint training programs, and several member species are asking to revise their military alliance agreements. Why? Gina asked. Because everyone wants humans on their side, Li Hyan said quietly, and no one wants to fight against them. Commander Thalanus nodded. Your species' reputation has undergone a complete transformation. 3 weeks ago, humans were seen as fragile newcomers who needed protection. Today, you're viewed as potential game changers in galactic military strategy. She gestured toward the training hall below. But more importantly, your techniques are making everyone safer. Combat casualties in training exercises have dropped across all species. Fighters are learning to think tactically instead of relying purely on instinct. What happens now? Gina asked. Now we prepare for the future, Commander Thalanus replied. The galaxy is a dangerous place. There are threats beyond Federation space that make our current conflicts look trivial. Species that have been honing their combat skills for millions of years. Having humans as allies instead of protected clients could make the difference between survival and extinction. She deactivated the display and turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and Cadet Kim Gina, your final combat evaluation has been completed. How did I do? Commander Thalanus smiled, an expression that looked strange on her metallic features. You received the highest score in Academy history. Congratulations. After she left, Gina and Li Hyan sat in thoughtful silence. The training sessions below continued, with humans and aliens learning from each other in ways that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. Do you regret coming here? Li Hyan asked eventually. Gina considered the question. No, this place has taught me things I never could have learned on Earth. And apparently, we've taught others things they couldn't learn anywhere else. A fair exchange, a good beginning. The Academy rotated slowly through space, carrying its cargo of young warriors toward uncertain futures. But those futures looked brighter now than they had before. The galaxy had gained new allies, new techniques, and new hope. In the training halls below, humans and aliens worked together to become something greater than either could achieve alone. They were learning that strength came in many forms, that intelligence could triumph over raw power, and that the most dangerous opponents were often the ones who looked the least threatening. The lesson that had begun with a single sparring match was spreading throughout the galaxy. Natural advantages were important, but they were not everything. Adaptation was powerful, but it required challenge to develop. And sometimes, the smallest and most fragile-looking species could teach the mightiest warriors new ways to survive. As Gina watched a human instructor demonstrate a joint lock to a group of fascinated alien cadets, she realized that this was just the beginning. Earth had joined the galactic community as supplicants, seeking protection and guidance. They were about to leave it as teachers, allies, and partners in a larger struggle for survival. The universe was about to discover what humans could accomplish when they weren't fighting each other, and that discovery would change everything. Li Hyan stood to leave, then turned back to Gina. Thank you, he said. For what? For showing me that being strong isn't the same as being dangerous, and that being dangerous isn't the same as being strong. As he walked away, Gina reflected on how much had changed since that first day in the cafeteria. The Academy was no longer a place where natural advantages determined outcomes. It was becoming something new, a place where different species could learn from each other's strengths and compensate for each other's weaknesses. The sparring match that had started it all was already becoming legend, but more importantly, it had become the foundation for a new understanding between species. Humans weren't the weakest members of the galactic community. They weren't the strongest either. They were something else entirely. A species that had learned to turn weakness into strength, disadvantage into opportunity, and conflict into growth. And the galaxy was about to benefit from thousands of years of hard-earned human wisdom about the art of survival.